relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Per a tweet from Let's Go Management, deal done. Sigaline Lefebvre will now challenge to get back the belt that was unfairly stripped from her due to an unfortunate injury. Watch this space. Sigaline Lefebvre, the former champion herself, responded by saying, "On my way to get my belt back." Up until recently, Sigaline Lefebvre was the reigning WBO champion in the women's super bantamweight division, and she was supposed to see action late last year in defense of her WBO title, but she suffered a hand injury that sidetracked her. As a result of that, the WBO decided to strip her. The newly vacated title ended up on the line in the Dionicius versus Acuna fight, which took place in Argentina, featuring two former Argentinian champions. Deborah Dionicius won the fight. Deborah Dionicius is now this division's newly crowned WBO champion, and it looks a lot like Sigaline is going to challenge her for her old belt. France's own Sigaline Lefebvre, who sports an unblemished record of 16 wins, no losses, and no draws, with one knockout. Just one recorded knockout. Sigaline, she's not a puncher, though she is crafty. Good physical dimensions for a super bantamweight, the kind of physical dimensions that could see her one day moving up to the women's featherweight division, though we will cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, it looks a lot like Sigaline's next fight will be against Argentina's own Deborah Dionicius, the newly crowned WBO champion. Deborah Dionicius, who sports a professional record of 35 wins with 4 losses, no draws,
6 knockouts.
Having never been knocked out in close to 40 professional contests, close to 40 professional bouts. Deborah Dionicius is a testament to the durability and toughness of Argentinian fighters, Argentinian sluggers, a former champion that has campaigned anywhere from as low as super flyweight to as high as featherweight. In this fight, she will be the naturally smaller, stumpier fighter. You can certainly give Deborah Dionicius the edge in experience. She's got more pro bouts and more rounds in the bank by far and wide. More rounds in the bank than Sigaline Lefebvre does, but Sigaline is a bit taller, bit longer, some years younger, though not as active. Not as active as Deborah Dionicius, where Sigaline Lefebvre only fought once, just once last year. Deborah fought about 4 times. She fought 3 times in 2021, 4 times last year, whereas Sigaline only fought 2 times in 2021 and just once last year. It's basically saying that Sigaline Lefebvre, the night of the fight, will have some ring rust to shake off. She'll be opposite the ring Deborah Dionicius, who has no ring rust to shake off, no cobwebs. She'll be sharp, or about as sharp as she can be. Having last seen action late last year in last month opposite the ring Marcela Acuna, who she's faced more than once, the former champion, the Argentinian legend Marcela Acuna, aged fighter, she's well into her 40s. A far cry from what she'll be facing in Sigaline Lefebvre. Sigaline Lefebvre, who last saw action in May of last year opposite the ring Melania Sirache. The fight hasn't been officially announced, not yet, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it's probably Sigaline Lefebvre's promoter staging the match, and that means that Sigaline will be the house fighter, likely with home field advantage. I wouldn't be at all surprised to hear that the fight is going down in La France. Give Sigaline an edge. Coupled with the fact that Sigaline is several years younger than Deborah Dionicius. Sigaline is about 29, whereas Deborah's 34. Sigaline's a bit taller, bit longer, bit rangier. I think she can win the fight. I think she can win her belt back. It's imperative that she does. It's a very important time in the women's super bantamweight division. You have a major promotional outfit in Matchroom that has about 3 prize stallions in that super bantamweight show, and the overall proliferation of talent between 118, 122, and 126. You either want to be fighting for a belt or hang on to the one you have, because big fights are coming. Should Sigaline Lefebvre procure the WBO title for the second time, she can look to unify titles with the winner of Ellie Scottney versus Shernika Johnson. That's an option. Or Venezuela's own reigning WBA champion, Mayerling Rivas. It's another option. Another matchroom fighter, reigning champion, experience. It's a very important time in the women's super bantamweight division. The division's overall profile is growing. Very soon, we're going to be seeing Ramla Ali in action on the undercard. of Serrano versus Cruz. That undisputed featherweight title fight. That's the main event. On the undercard, unbeaten Ramla Ali, yet another matchroom fighter, is going to be in action. And if she makes it through that fight and maintains her unbeaten record, I could very much see Ramla Ali versus Sigaline Lefebvre for the WBO title happening.
It makes sense.
That being said, it is imperative that Sigaline Lefebvre get that WBO title back.
She has to.
Big fights are on the horizon, and that alphabet title incentivizes her as an option for any unbeaten up-and-comer, any fighter with a major promotional outfit.
Any unbeaten up-and-comer that's aspiring to become a world champion.
Just have to wait for an official announcement as to when exactly the fight between Sigaline Lefebvre and Deborah Dionicius is going down, but I'll say it here now. I do like Sigaline Lefebvre to win. I do like her to win on points.
We'll see if she does.
Men's super bantamweight news, a few particulars in association with what's supposed to be the Naoya Inoue versus Stephen Fulton fight, how they've agreed to fight sometime in May, and let's hope that they do. We've already discussed this story from different angles, but what stands out the most is that it's the opposite of what you expect from a PBC fighter, a PBC champion. Stephen Fulton, who's promoted by PBC, whilst Inoue is co-promoted by Top Rank, two promotional companies who rarely do business with one another. However, Inoue's Japanese promoter, Mr. Akihiko Honda, drives the direction of the three-division champion's career, especially when those fights are in Inoue's homeland. Fulton told ESPN in June that he believed a fight with Inoue was realistic if Inoue moved up to 122 pounds in time. I don't shy away from big fights, Fulton said then. A lot of people want to see me versus Inoue. A lot of people want to talk about that as well. Had I been more known like Inoue, he added, I'd be on that pound-for-pound list.
Pound-for-pound lists by way of popular periodicals oftentimes really are popularity contests when what they're really intended to be are skills assessments.
An assessment of a fighter's overall skills based on some sort of a control, some sort of governing criteria, though oftentimes what most allow to govern their pound-for-pound lists are their feelings.
Which makes discussing them a redundancy where you might feel one way about a fighter, somebody else might feel another.
Might feel the exact opposite way that you feel about the same fighter. Inoue left no doubt in his rematch with Nonito Donaire last June when he scored a second-round TKO of the future Hall of Famer. Against Fulton, Inoue will certainly meet his biggest and toughest challenge to date. Fulton is a career-long 122-pounder who can box from both the inside and the outside, often throws upward of 1,000 punches in his fights. Inoue, meanwhile, began his career at 108 pounds. Generational talents like Inoue often aren't pushed to the brink until they continue to move up in weight. The real battle starts from here, Inoue said last week.
This fight's announcement has given rise to tribalist sentiments in the American quadrant, though I have no doubts those same kind of sentiments exist in the Japanese one.
Many of the Americans are rooting for the American, and many of the Japanese are rooting for the Japanese fighter. That's the way it goes. There is a place for tribalism in organized sports, though I myself do not allow tribalism, nationalism, or any isms of any kind to govern my hierarchy of thought. From what I see here, this is an even matchup.
An even fight.
Stephen Fulton has never shared the ring with a fighter of this caliber, though in many ways the same can be said for Naoya Inoue. He's fought some very good fighters, at least one legend.
He's fought a lot of champions, a lot of top guys.
At the weights he's campaigned, he has, though stylistically, he's never faced a defensive specialist, the likes of a Stephen Fulton, a more defensively responsible fighter, surely, than Emmanuel Rodriguez,
McDonald, Payano,
Nonito Donaire 2 times. He's fought some really good fighters, but none of them have been quite as defensively minded as Stephen Fulton, which is what makes the fight so intriguing between Stephen being the naturally bigger fighter and the defensively responsible fighter.
More defensively minded than Inoue, at least.
Makes for a very intriguing matchup. Former boxing insider Raging Babe asked, is Stephen Fulton still with PBC? Is he still with Al Heyman? I need Jake's take.
Jake Donovan.
Veteran boxing scribe Steve Kim imparted a word stating he being Stephen Fulton, demanded this fight, or he'd make his grievances known, I'm told, to which Jake Donovan replied, bullseye.
So Stefan demanded this fight.
Against Al Heyman's wishes? I mean, there's a lot that needs to be addressed here because, as stated, this is very much the opposite of what I expected and the opposite of what many of you out there expected. Last we heard, Stefan was supposed to be going to featherweight. Then he does a 180. He's set to go to Japan to fight Inoue now in May. It's almost too good to be true, and many of the presuppositions we have in reference to PBC fighters are fueled by previous instances of those fighters.
Previous instances of those fighters not being willing to do what Stefan is about to.
Luis Ortiz was made a multi-million-dollar offer to come over and box Anthony Joshua, but he rejected it. So did Adam Kobnowski. Gervonta Davis was offered upwards of $8 million to come over and unify titles with then IBF champion Tevin Farmer. He didn't do it. Jermall Charlo wouldn't cross over to box Demetrius Andrade in what would have been a unification match between them. Gary Russell didn't want to fly over to the UK. Seven-figure offer to unify titles with Josh Warrington.
More often than not, that's how it goes.
Thereby creating that expectation that this fight would not materialize in tandem with news that Stefan was set to move up to featherweight anyway.
Sounds a lot like Stefan Fulton's going against the grain. Per Steve Kim's comment, he demanded this fight or he would make his grievances known.
We take all of this at face value. The rumors and the gossips.
What could have left Stefan Fulton feeling so inclined to go against the grain, to go his own way, do his own thing for his own legacy?
Even if it means boxing as the away fighter on somebody else's show, somebody else's promotion. So often we see that PBC fighters don't elect to do this. Why is Stefan doing it?
Well, if we're going to take this story at face value, and we're assuming the fight actually happens,
Al Heyman don't have a bigger fight for Stefan Fulton, you understand. In-house, there isn't a single fight that Al Heyman can make for Stefan that is bigger and more lucrative than this one. This fight has more of a profile than any fight that Al Heyman can hope to make on his side of things. So that might be a motivating factor.
That's one.
Adrian Bronier's recent departure and his very public comments about the PBC and what's going on over there.
That's two.
Perhaps it serviced as a wake-up call to at least some or at least one of those fighters that the PBC...
Don't limit yourself to just what they have to offer because they don't have it all.
Make your money while you can. Where you can. Boxers have a limited shelf life.
Maybe that's why Stefan's going against the grain.
Maybe that's what's motivating him.
Could Adrian Broner's recent departure and the comments that he's made since then have motivated other fighters to strike out, go their own way, do their own thing, irrespective of what Al wants for them?
Because there was a plan to put Stefan in there with Brandon for a second time. They did petition the WBC to sanction a featherweight bout between them.
This news goes against that plan.
Tell you the truth, I care less and less about the behind-the-scenes stuff so long as the fight happens.
Let's hope it does.
In other news, Golden Boy's Eric Gomez has put forward Jaime Munguia as a potential opponent for Dimitri Bivol this year, saying one thinks it's crazy because he has been fighting at middleweight, but Jaime and Fernando Beltran, his co-promoter by way of Zen for Promotions, see something they like in that fight.
Let me get this straight.
They swerved Demetrius Andrade. They swerved Jermall Charlo.
They also swerved Yanni Bekelim Kanalai. I mean, every single one of those fights was a doable fight for Jaime Munguia.
Every single one. And now we're intended to believe that what his handlers at Golden Boy and Zenfer, what they want is to put him in there with Dimitri.
Give me a break.
I can only assume that because Dimitri Bivol has officially arrived and he's buzzing right now, what they hope to do is promote Jaime by way of name association, i.e. clout chasing. They have no serious intent. No serious intention of putting this guy in there with Dimitri Bivol. They've been handling his career with kid gloves on for the longest time.
As you can imagine, the boxing world reacted to these quotes by way of Jaime's handlers. Chris Mannix stated, Munguia versus Triple G is the most obvious fight to make.
To which Mike Kopinger replied, not happening. Zero interest from the Triple G side.
That one threw me for a loop.
That one caught me by surprise. I, like veteran boxing scribe Chris Mannix, I was under the impression that Golovkin versus Munguia was the natural choice, the easiest fight to make.
The obvious one.
A few months ago, we heard something about Gennady Golovkin doing a fight with unbeaten up-and-comer from Brazil, Esquiva Falcao, in his own neck of the woods. We heard something about that, haven't heard much about it since, and the feeling was at least on my part, was that should he win that fight, he would then move into a potential Jaime Munguia fight. But if it's the way that Mike says it is, and Gennady Golovkin isn't interested in Jaime, then what are his options?
Well, he can fight the winner of Eubank versus Smith this weekend.
In light of that news that Gennady Golovkin would be returning opposite the ring Esquiva Falcao, I floated several different scenarios out there, and one among them was a Golovkin versus Eubank fight, provided that Chris Eubank Jr. wins this weekend's fight, and I think that he's going to.
I think he can.
I think he will. If it's the way Mike says it is, and Gennady's not actually interested in Jaime, which is surprising, he can always look to get some of that UK money on Sky Sports box office.
No stranger to the platform. He's no stranger to the United Kingdom. Box Kell Brook there at the O2 Arena.
Was intended to be Chris Eubank Jr. some years ago, but the Chris Eubank Jr. people couldn't find their pen. We all know what happened. Kell Brook ended up standing in his place.
If Munguia's no longer in the running, is Chris?
Sky Sports, in the absence of Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, have quickly developed a reputation for overpaying.
Third-party backing.
Paying for shows and paying for fighters well in excess of their actual market value. That's how you can characterize Lawrence Okolie's migration from Matchroom over to Sky. They offered Lawrence a dollar amount that Matchroom wasn't willing to match.
So could the same thing happen with Golovkin?
It is entirely possible, and while that's just me bouncing ideas around, that's just me speculating, it is entirely possible that the Sky Sports people have a lot of money waiting for Gennady if he's willing to cross over, if he's willing to work with them. And Gennady Golovkin himself, he hasn't officially announced his retirement. He hasn't vacated the 2 alphabet titles he's in possession of.
Chris Eubank Jr. wins this weekend's fight. There are talks of him potentially revisiting the Conor Benn fight, but I don't think those negotiations are going to go as smoothly as they did before.
At minimum, they might not. And if they don't, Chris Eubank Jr. has the option of exploring a Gennady Golovkin fight. Previous years, he has expressed an interest in facing an older version of Gennady than the one he was set to originally face many years ago.
Many years later, it seems he's found his pen.
So that's an option. It's surprising what Mike Kopinger is saying, that there is zero interest in the Golovkin side to take on Jaime Munguia. I thought that was a natural choice.
I guess not.
Maybe that's what's fueling these talks of a potential Munguia versus Bivol fight, though I reiterate, I think that's just talk. I don't think they're serious.
They're not fighting Dimitri.
Although they may have been holding out hope that they could fight Gennady, and if it's the way Mike says it is, well, they're up the creek without a paddle.
They're fucked.